Mary did not lament, but she brooded continually over the misfortune, and sank into a state of dejection from which no effort of mine could rouse her. I could not possibly bring her to regard the matter on its bright side as I did, and indeed I was so fearful of being charged with childish frivolity or stupid insensibility that I carefully kept most of my bright ideas and cheering notions to myself, well knowing they could not be appreciated. My mother thought only of consoling my father, and paying our debts, and retrenching our expenditure by every available means, but my father was completely overwhelmed by the calamity. Health, strength, and spirits sank beneath the blow, and he never wholly recovered them. In vain my mother strove to cheer him, by appealing to his piety, to his courage, to his affection for herself and us. That very affection was his greatest torment. It was for our sakes he had so ardently longed to increase his fortune. It was our interest that had lent such brightness to his hopes, and that imparted such bitterness to his present distress. He now tormented himself with remorse at having neglected my mother's advice, which would at least have saved him from the additional burden of debt. He vainly reproached himself for having brought her from the dignity, the ease, the luxury of her former station, to toil with him through the cares and toils of poverty. It was gall and wormwood to his soul to see that splendid, highly accomplished woman, once so courted and admired, transformed into an active, managing housewife, with hands and head continually occupied with household labors and household economy. The very willingness with which she performed these duties, the cheerfulness with which she bore her reverses, and the kindness which withheld her from imputing the smallest blame to him, were all perverted by this ingenious self-tormentor into further aggravations of his sufferings, and thus the mind preyed upon the body, and disordered the system of the nerves, and they in turn increased the troubles of the mind, till by action and reaction his health was seriously impaired, and not one of us could convince him that the aspect of our affairs was not half so gloomy, so utterly hopeless, as his morbid imagination presented it to be. The useful pony phaeton was sold, together with the stout, well-fed pony, the old favourite that we had fully determined should end its days in peace, and never pass from our hands. The little coach-house and stable were let, the servant boy, and the more efficient, being the more expensive, of the two maidservants were dismissed. Our clothes were mended, turned, and darned to the utmost verge of decency. Our food, always plain, was now simplified to an unprecedented degree, except my father's favourite dishes. Our coals and candles were painfully economized, the pair of candles reduced to one, and that most sparingly used, the candles carefully husbanded in the half-empty grate, especially when my father was out on his parish duties, or confined to bed through illness. Then we sat with our feet on the fender, scraping the perishing embers together from time to time, and occasionally adding a slight scattering of the dust and fragments of coal, just to keep them alive. As for our carpets, they in time were worn threadbare, and patched and darned even to a greater extent than our garments. To save the expense of a gardener, Mary and I undertook to keep the garden in order, and all the cooking and household work that could not easily be managed by one servant girl was done by my mother and sister, with a little occasional help from me, only a little, because, though a woman in my own estimation, I was still a child in theirs, and my mother, like most active managing women, was not gifted with very active daughters, for this reason, that being so clever and diligent herself, she was never tempted to trust her affairs to a deputy, but on the contrary was willing to act and think for others as well as for number one, and whatever was the business in hand, she was apt to think that no one could do it so well as herself. So whenever I offered to assist her, I received such an answer as, "No, love, you cannot indeed. There is nothing here you can do. Go and help your sister, or get her to take a walk with you. Tell her she must not sit so much, and stay so constantly in the house as she does. She may well look thin and dejected. Mary, mamma says I'm to help you, or get you to take a walk with me. She says you may well look thin and dejected if you sit so constantly in the house." "Help me you cannot, Agnes, and I cannot go out with you. I have far too much to do." "Then let me help you." "You cannot, dear child. Go and practise your music or play with the kitten." There was always plenty of sewing on hand, but I had not been taught to cut out a single garment, and except plain hemming and seaming, there was little I could do, even in that line, for they both asserted that it was far easier to do the work themselves than to prepare it for me, and besides they liked better to see me prosecuting my studies or amusing myself. It was time enough for me to sit bending over my work like a grave matron, when my favourite little pussy had become a steady old cat. Under such circumstances, although I was not many degrees more useful than the kitten, my idleness was not entirely without excuse. Through all our troubles, I never but once heard my mother complain of our want of money. As summer was coming on, she observed to Mary and me, "What a desirable thing it would be for your papa to spend a few weeks at a watering-place. I am convinced the sea air and the change of scene would be of incalculable service to him. But then, you see, there's no money," she added with a sigh. We both wished exceedingly that the thing might be done, and lamented greatly that it could not. "Well, well," said she, "it's no use complaining. Possibly something might be done to further the project after all. Mary, you are a beautiful drawer. What do you say of doing a few more pictures in your best style, and getting them framed, with the water-colour drawings you have already done, and trying to dispose of them to some liberal picture dealer, who has the sense to discern their merits?" "Mamma, I should be delighted if you think they could be sold, and for anything worth while." "It is worth while trying, however, my dear. Do you procure the drawings, and I'll endeavour to find a purchaser." "I wish I could do something," said I. "You, Agnes? Well, who knows? You draw pretty well, too. If you choose some simple piece for your subject, I dare say you will be able to produce something we shall all be proud to exhibit." "But I have another scheme in my head, mamma, and have had long, only I did not like to mention it." "Indeed! Pray tell us what it is." "I should like to be a governess." My mother uttered an exclamation of surprise, and laughed. My sister dropped her work in astonishment, exclaiming, "You, a governess, Agnes? What can you be dreaming of?" "Well, I don't see anything so very extraordinary in it. I do not pretend to be able to instruct great girls, but surely I could teach little ones, and I should like it so much. I am so fond of children. Do let me, mamma." "But, my love, you have not learned to take care of yourself yet, and young children require more judgment and experience to manage than elder ones." "But, mamma, I am above 18, and quite able to take care of myself, and others too. You do not know half the wisdom and prudence I possess, because I have never been tried." "Only think," said Mary, "what you would do in a house full of strangers, without me or mamma to speak and act for you, with a parcel of children, besides yourself, to attend to, and no one to look to for advice. You would not even know what clothes to put on. You think, because I always do as you bid me, I have no judgment of my own. But only try me, that is all I ask, and you shall see what I can do." At that moment my father entered, and the subject of our discussion was explained to him. "What, my little Agnes a governess?" said he, and in spite of his dejection he laughed at the idea. "Yes, papa, don't you say anything against it. I should like it so much, and I'm sure I could manage delightfully. But, my darling, we could not spare you," and a tear glistened in his eye as he added, "No, no, afflicted as we are, surely we are not brought to that pass yet." "No, no," said my mother, "there is no necessity whatever for such a step. It is merely a whim of her own. So you must hold your tongue, you naughty girl, for though you are so ready to leave us, you know very well we cannot part with you."